So we've looked at core arguments, we've looked at historical versus theoretical, we looked at it earlier automatically, looking at checks and balances, things that keep a neutrality on politics, the limitations of realizing democracy, investigating how democratic outcomes should automatically transfer to governments. Examples we can draw on, again, things like in the UK, parliamentary sovereignty, the Crown, the constitutional monarch, keeping a check on the extremism of parties, designed to sort of make sure that democracy isn't unfettered. It can't do what it wants. It's not automatically conferred. There are checks or processes involved in keeping a lid on that. And this is a key component here of our counter arguments. What else confers a mandate? Again, thinking you want to provide arguments, counter arguments, and then come to some sort of balanced conclusion. What else confers a mandate? Now, I mentioned this earlier. Things like authorities, natural law, religion. We can make the argument that actually a mandate is rarely secured by democracy, or it's weakly secured by democracy, but it can be secured and conferred by a forceful seizing of power, dictatorial regimes. We could say that perhaps paternalistic governance is what confers a mandate. So paternalism, we'll unpack this in a later session, but being essentially concerning the denying of liberties and the rights to vote and things, however, with the intention of speeding up the process of governance, getting rid of the disagreements associated with democracy in order to get straight to getting on with improving the economy, improving public works, jobs, and benefiting individuals in the sort of trickle down. So we could technically argue maybe that this is what confers a mandate for governance. Perhaps partially winning an election, a coalition government confers a mandate for governance. We can say that there's multiple mandates conferred for governance if there are two parties which emerge as equally victorious. But there's a couple of other, before we jump ahead to the next session, there's a couple of other assumptions or weaknesses in the question we ought to tackle. Now, all questions are inevitably simple. They carry assumptions, taking things for granted, as we've mentioned. We've talked about the weaknesses of a free and fair election. Democracy is never perfectly free and fair. Things like misinformation, corruption, bribery. We can use this, therefore, to critique the assumptions of the question, or we can use it to support our limitations. We should not always absolutely confer a mandate for governance, because free and fair elections are never really possible. So perhaps it's corrupt, partially free elections which confer mandates, or rather that elections can never confer a mandate because they're not truly legitimate. I'd like to finish off with, so that's sort of the weaknesses in the question, assumptions, what does it take for granted, and really attacking those. But I'd like to sort of take a moment really to finish off this first session by dwelling on mandate, because this is really the difficult term in the question. What is a mandate? I've said it's authority. So how is someone conferred authority to govern? They're literally in government, they're given the power written in the Constitution. Everybody is agreed upon a mandate, upon authority. So actually it's quite intangible. So what I mean by that is it's impossible to put a finger on. It's impossible to hold a mandate. It's something that exists kind of in our minds and in the collective mind. Everybody is collectively in agreement that a particular government has authority to govern.